I am Elias Grant, a cattle rancher in Dustville, Nebraska, where the wind blows across the dry fields like a whipping horse. It has been 3 years since my wife Sarah left this world, leaving me and my 9-year-old daughter Clara in a simple log cabin in the middle of a vast prairie. My life now revolves around tending cows, mending fences, and trying to teach Clara how to live uprightly in an increasingly cruel world. But as I hitched Dusty to a stake in town that Wednesday afternoon, I had no idea that my life was about to be turned upside down forever. I walked into Dustville with a simple intention: to buy a few bags of flour, some medicine for Clara, and return before dusk. The money in my coat pocket contained only $87, the money I had saved all year for the harsh winter. Every penny was precious, for food, clothes, medicine for my daughter. But as I passed the Red Coyote Saloon, the sound I heard was not drunken laughter or the usual shattering of glasses. It was crying, a desperate sound, as if someone's heart were being ripped out. I stopped, my heart pounding, as if Sarah's spirit were whispering that I couldn't just walk past. I pushed open the saloon door, the dim light from the oil lamps illuminating faces twisted by alcohol and greed. The smell of whiskey, cigarettes, and sweat filled my nostrils, making me want to turn and leave. But then I saw her. Eliza Jane, a young girl no more than 20, stood on a wooden platform in the middle of the room. She wore a thin white dress, her hands shaking as she tried to shield her body from the hungry eyes of the men. Her face was wet with tears, but those eyes, oh my, those eyes were an ocean of pain. I had never met Eliza before, but I had heard of her, an orphan surviving by washing and cleaning for Jonas Wheeler, the ruthless saloon owner. Jonas stood by the dais, his smile making me feel something dirty crawling up my skin. He banged his wooden mallet, his voice booming like a market hawker. "Gentlemen, here is a girl, pure as morning dew, starting price, $40. I felt the blood rush to my head, burning. This was no cattle market. This was a human being, a girl being treated like merchandise, stripped of her dignity before this bloodthirsty crowd. I looked around and saw the men, miners, vagabonds, traders, laughing, shouting prices as if they were in some sick amusement. $50, shouted a bearded man. 60, added another. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. I wanted to rush up to the podium and drag the girl away, but I was just a farmhand, without a gun, without power. I looked at Eliza, saw her head bowed, her shoulders shaking. I thought of Clara, back at home with Mrs. Henderson, with her clear blue eyes and her mother's smile. If Clara had been up there on the podium, would anyone have stepped up to help her? The thought made my heart clench, like someone was squeezing it. Jonas gavelled again, his voice smooth as a snake. "This girl is a rarity, gentlemen. Eliza Jane, flawless, at the service of the highest bidder." I wanted to scream, to punch him in the face to shut him up. But I knew that if I did, I would not only lose my life but leave Clara an orphan. I stood there helpless as the bidding rose, $70, then 80. The crowd cheered as if this were all a joke. I felt my stomach twist, anger rising in waves. Then I heard the voice of Caleb Holt, the notorious rancher of the area. He stood in the corner, tall and stony-faced, his eyes gleaming with possessiveness. $100, he said, his voice low and sharp. The room fell silent for a moment. $100 was a lot of money, enough to buy a whole herd of cattle. I looked at Eliza and saw her face pale, as if her last shred of hope had been taken away. Everyone knew Caleb Holt, the man who treated women like toys, who abandoned them when he was done with them. I'd heard rumors of girls disappearing after falling into his hands, and I knew that if Eliza belonged to him, she wouldn't survive. I couldn't take it anymore. My blood was boiling, as if Sarah herself were standing there, urging me to act. I thought about the $87 in my pocket, the money I'd saved for Clara, for the winter, for our lives. But looking at Eliza, I saw more than just a stranger. I saw a person stripped of everything, pushed into hell because she had no one to protect her. I thought about what Sarah had said. Being kind isn't always easy, Elias, but it's the only thing worth doing. I stepped forward, my voice shaking but firm. $150. The entire saloon turned to look at me as if I had gone mad. Jonas narrowed his eyes, his smile widening, greedy. "Oh, we have a new player. $150 from the cowboy. Who's going to bid more?" Caleb Holt turned, his eyes boring into me. "Are you sure, farmer?" he growled, his hand already on the gun at his side. I felt sweat trickle down my back, but I stood tall, looking him straight in the eye. I am. The crowd murmured, some snickered, some looked at me as if I had signed my own death warrant. I knew what I was doing. $150, nearly double what I had, was all I could promise. If I won this auction, I would have to find a way to make ends meet, perhaps sell a few cows, perhaps take on debt. But I couldn't let Eliza fall into Caleb's hands. Couldn't let her suffer the same fate as those who had come before her. Eliza raised her head, her eyes searching the crowd for me. For a moment, I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes, as fragile as a candle in the wind. But I also saw fear that I, like the other men, might have ulterior motives. I wanted to scream at her that I wasn't like that I was just trying to help. But now was not the time. Jonas banged the hammer again, his voice almost gloating. $150. Anyone bid higher? Caleb stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. You're playing with fire, farmer. 160. I felt my heart stop. I didn't have enough money. I only had $87, and I was betting it all on a false promise. But then I thought of Clara, of her eyes as she asked me why I had to do the right thing. I thought of Sarah, who had taught me that sometimes doing the right thing meant sacrificing everything. $200, I shouted, my voice echoing across the room. The salon fell silent, as if in disbelief. Jonas almost jumped up, his eyes blazing. $200. We have $200. Is there anyone willing to pay more? Caleb Holt looked at me, and this time I saw the anger in his eyes. He wasn't used to being outdone, not used to being humiliated in public by a poor peasant like me. He stepped forward, so close I could smell the gunpowder and leather on him. Who do you think you are, peasant? He growled. You think you can walk in here and steal what's mine? I swallowed, but I didn't back down. I'm Elias Grant, I said, my voice calm even as my heart pounded. And this girl is coming with me. Not as merchandise, but for safety. Jonas gavelled one last time, his voice almost singing. Sold Eliza Jane to the cowboy for $200. The crowd erupted in murmurs, but I only looked at Eliza. She stepped down from the podium, her legs shaking, her eyes filled with a mixture of doubt and hope. I stepped forward, trying to keep my voice light. Miss Eliza, I'm not one of them. I have a daughter, Clara, and I can't stand to see this happen. You'll be safe with me, I promise. She said nothing, just nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. But as we turned toward the door, I saw Caleb Holt standing there, his hand still on the gun, his eyes like a hungry wolf's. I knew this wasn't over. I had just saved Eliza from the auction block, but I had also made an enemy of one of the most dangerous men in town. And with $200 I didn't have, I had just put my life and Clara's life on the line. The moment Jonas Wheeler's gavel slammed down, sealing my bid of $200 for Eliza Jane, the air in the Red Coyote saloon turned thick with tension. I felt every eye in the room boring into me, some curious, some mocking, and one pair belonging to Caleb Holt burning with a hatred so raw it could have set the place ablaze. I stood there, heart pounding like a stampede, my hands trembling not from fear but from the weight of what I'd just done. $200. I didn't have it, not even close. The $87 in my pocket were all I had to keep Clara fed and warm through the winter. But looking at Eliza, her tear-streaked face pale as moonlight, I knew I couldn't have walked away. Not from her, not from this. I stepped toward the platform, my boots heavy on the creaky floorboards, and extended a hand to help Eliza down. She hesitated, her eyes searching mine for some hidden motive. I couldn't blame her. Men like Jonas and Caleb had stripped her of any reason to trust. Miss Eliza, I said, keeping my voice low, steady. I ain't like them. I got a daughter, Clara, just a year or two younger than you in spirit. I'm taking you out of here, and you'll be safe. I swear it on my Sarah's grave. Her lips quivered, and she took my hand, her grip weak but desperate, like a drowning soul clinging to a rope. The crowd parted as we moved toward the saloon's batwing doors, but their whispers followed us like a swarm of locusts. Fool farmer, someone muttered. He's a dead man, another hissed. I ignored them, focusing on getting Eliza out before Caleb made a move. His presence loomed behind us, a shadow I could feel without turning. I knew he wasn't done, not by a long shot. A man like Caleb Holt didn't lose gracefully, especially not to a nobody like me, a cattle rancher scraping by with a small herd and a smaller name. As we reached the doors, I heard his voice, low and venomous. "You're making a mistake, Grant." I froze, my hand on Eliza's arm to keep her steady. I turned, meeting Caleb's gaze. He stood near the bar, his hand resting on the ivory handle of his Colt, his face a mask of cold fury. "You think you can just walk out of here with my property? You think you can humiliate me in front of this town?" His words dripped with menace, and the saloon went quiet, every man waiting for blood to spill. "She ain't your property," I said, my voice louder than I meant, echoing off the walls. "She's a person, Holt, and I'm taking her somewhere she'll be treated like one." A murmur rippled through the crowd, some shocked, some amused. I felt Eliza tense beside me, her breath hitching. Caleb's eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought he'd draw right there. But Jonas, ever the opportunist, stepped in, his greasy smile flashing. Now, gentlemen, let's keep this civil. The bid's done, fair and square. Mr. Grant, pay up, and she's yours." I swallowed hard, the weight of my lie pressing down like a millstone. I didn't have $200, I barely had half that, but I couldn't back down now, not with Eliza trembling beside me, not with Caleb watching like a hawk ready to swoop. "I'll settle with you later, Jonas," I said, trying to sound confident. "You know I'm good for it." Jonas's smile faltered, but before he could argue, I guided Eliza toward the door, praying we'd make it outside before hell broke loose. The sunlight hit us like a slap as we stepped onto Main Street, the dust swirling around us in the dry Nebraska wind. I felt exposed, like a deer in a hunter's sights. Eliza clung to my arm, her steps unsteady, her eyes darting around as if expecting Caleb to leap out from every shadow. "Mr. Grant," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why are you doing this? Men they don't help like this, without wanting something." Her words cut deeper than I expected, a reminder of the world she'd been forced to survive. I stopped, turning to face her. "Eliza, my wife Sarah taught me one thing before she passed. Doing right ain't about what you get out of it. It's about what's left of you if you don't. I got a little girl waiting at home, and if she was in your place, I'd pray someone would stand up for her. That's all this is." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of trust in her gaze. But that moment of peace shattered like glass when Caleb Holt's voice rang out behind us. "You ain't going nowhere, Grant." I turned to see him standing in the saloon doorway, flanked by 3 of his men, their hands hovering over their guns. The street went quiet, shopkeepers and passers-by freezing in place, sensing a storm brewing. My heart sank. I wasn't armed, never had been one for guns. All I had was my word and a stubborn streak Sarah used to call foolish. Caleb stepped forward, his spurs jingling with each deliberate step. "You think you can outbid me and walk away? I paid Jonas $40 last week for first rights to that girl. She's mine, and you're going to hand her over, or I'll make you regret it." His men spread out, blocking the street, their eyes cold and ready. I felt Eliza's grip tighten, her fear radiating like heat. I wanted to tell her it'd be okay, but the truth was, I didn't know if we'd make it out of Dustville alive. I took a step forward, placing myself between Eliza and Caleb. "You got no claim, Holt. The auction was fair, and I won. You want to fight over it, you'll have to answer to more than just me." I gestured to the growing crowd around us, shopkeepers, farmers, even a few women clutching their baskets, all watching with a mix of fear and curiosity. I didn't know if they'd help, but I hoped the weight of their eyes would make Caleb think twice. His laugh was cold, like the rattle of a snake. "You think these people care about you, farmer? They're just here for the show. Hand her over or I'll take her myself." His hand moved to his gun, and I felt my stomach drop. I had no weapon, no plan, just a burning need to protect Eliza and get home to Clara. I thought of my daughter, her blonde braids and trusting eyes, waiting for me to come back with supplies. If I died here, what would happen to her? Then, something shifted. A voice cut through the tension like a knife. That's enough, Caleb. It was Clara Thornton, the town doctor, stepping out from her clinic across the street. She was a wiry woman, grey hair pulled tight in a bun, but her eyes were fierce, and she held a rifle with steady hands. Behind her came Reverend Jacob Lee, his face stern, and Harold Pike, the blacksmith, clutching a hammer. A handful of others joined them, ordinary folk, not fighters, but their presence was a wall Caleb couldn't ignore. "You're threatening a man and a girl in broad daylight, Holt," Thornton said, her voice calm but unyielding. "This town's had enough of your kind. Let 'em go, or you'll answer to us." The crowd murmured, some stepping closer, their faces hardening. I saw Caleb's confidence flicker, just for a moment, as he realized this wasn't just about me anymore. Dustville was watching, and they weren't on his side. I seized the moment, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. "Caleb, you're done here. Take your men and walk away, or this street's gonna be your graveyard." It was a bluff. I had no gun, no way to back it up. But I saw doubt creep into his eyes. He glanced at Jonas, who was hovering near the saloon door, looking nervous. "You heard the man, Holt," Jonas said, trying to defuse the situation. "Fair auction, fair sale." Caleb's jaw tightened, but he didn't draw. "This ain't over, Grant," he spat, his eyes locking onto mine. "You'll pay for this." He turned to his men, jerking his head toward their horses. "Let's go." They backed away, but I knew this was only a pause, not an end. Caleb Holt wasn't the kind to forgive or forget. I helped Eliza onto Dusty, my old mare, and we started down Main Street, the crowd parting to let us pass. My heart was still racing, my hands slick with sweat. I'd saved Eliza from the auction, but at what cost? I'd made an enemy of the most dangerous man in Nebraska, and I had no idea how I'd pay Jonas the $200 I'd promised. All I knew was that Eliza was safe for now, and I'd do whatever it took to keep her that way. As we rode out of Dustville, I couldn't shake the feeling that Caleb's shadow was still trailing us, waiting for the right moment to strike. Riding out of Dustville with Eliza on the back of Dusty, my heart felt like it was caught in a vice. The sun was dipping low, painting the prairie in shades of orange and gold, but there was no beauty in it for me. Every hoofbeat echoed with the threat Caleb Holt had left hanging in the air. "This ain't over, Grant." I knew he meant it. Men like Caleb didn't just walk away from a slight, they hunted it down, made it bleed. Eliza sat behind me, her hands gripping my coat, her silence louder than any words. I could feel her fear, her uncertainty, and it tore at me. I'd promised her safety, but as we headed toward my ranch, 8 miles across open land, I wondered if I'd just dragged her from one danger into another. Clara was waiting at home, probably sitting by the window, watching for me like she always did. The thought of her kept me going, but it also twisted the knife in my gut. What kind of father was I, risking everything, our money, our safety, for a stranger? But then I'd glance back at Eliza, her face pale, her eyes haunted, and I'd hear Sarah's voice in my head. "Do what's right, Elias, no matter the cost." I'd made my choice, but now I had to live with it, and that meant getting us all home alive. Main Street faded behind us, replaced by the endless stretch of prairie, dotted with sagebrush and the occasional gnarled tree. The wind carried a chill, a reminder that winter was coming, and with it, the hardship of surviving on what little I had left. I tried to focus on the path ahead, but my mind kept replaying the scene in the saloon. Jonas's greasy grin, Caleb's murderous glare, the crowd's whispers. I'd humiliated a powerful man in front of Dustville, and I knew he'd make me pay. The question was when and how. We'd barely gone a mile when I heard it. A child's voice, high and frantic, cutting through the quiet. "Papa! Papa!" My blood turned to ice. Clara. I pulled Dusty to a stop, scanning the horizon, and there she was, running toward us down the dirt road, her blonde braids bouncing, her face flushed from effort. She wasn't supposed to be here. I'd left her with Mrs. Henderson, the widow who watched her when I went to town. My heart sank as I realized she must have slipped away, scared or curious, and followed me into Dustville. "Clara, stop!" I shouted, jumping off the horse and running to meet her. She threw herself into my arms, breathless, her eyes wide with excitement and fear. "Papa, Mrs. Henderson fell asleep and I got worried, so I came to find you." Her words tumbled out, innocent and reckless, and I felt a wave of panic. She was here, in the open, with Caleb Holt's threat still ringing in my ears. I knelt down, gripping her shoulders. "Clara, you gotta listen to me." You shouldn't be here. It's dangerous. Her face fell, sensing the edge in my voice, but before I could explain, Eliza slid off the horse and knelt beside us. Honey, I'm Eliza, she said softly, her voice trembling but kind. Your papa's helping me, but we're in a bit of trouble right now. Clara's eyes darted between us, confused but trusting. Are you okay, Papa? She asked, her small hand clutching mine. Before I could answer, a shadow fell over us. I looked up to see Caleb Holt and his men riding out from behind a cluster of buildings at the edge of town. He'd followed us, just as I'd feared, and the sight of Clara seemed to ignite something dark in his eyes. Well, ain't this sweet, he called, his voice dripping with mockery. Farmer boy brought his little girl to the party. Pretty thing, ain't she? His men laughed, spreading out to block our path, their hands on their guns. Eliza grabbed my arm, her voice urgent. He's gonna use her against you, Elias. I felt a surge of rage, hot and blinding, but I forced it down. Clara was here, and I had to stay calm for her. Clara, get behind me, I said, pushing her gently toward Eliza. Stay quiet, no matter what. She obeyed, her small body trembling as she hid behind us. Caleb dismounted, his spurs clinking as he sauntered closer. You made a big mistake, Grant, he said, his eyes flicking to Eliza, then to Clara. You think you can play hero and walk away? That girl's mine, bought and paid for. And now I'm thinking your daughter might make this even more interesting. His words hit like a punch to the gut. I saw red, my hands itching to tear him apart, but I was unarmed, and his men were ready to draw. I was 1 man against 5, and I had 2 lives depending on me. You touch my daughter, Holt, and I'll kill you with my bare hands, I growled, stepping forward. My voice shook with fury, but I meant every word. He laughed, a cold, ugly sound that made my skin crawl. Big talk for a man with no gun. Here's the deal, farmer. Leave Eliza here, take your kid, and walk away. I'll let you live. Refuse, and we'll see how much your little girl cries when I'm done with you. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, with no way forward and no way back. Leave Eliza, and I'd betray everything I stood for, everything Sarah had taught me. Fight, and I'd risk Clara's life. My mind raced, searching for a way out, but all I could see was Caleb's smirk, his men closing in, and Clara's terrified face. Eliza knelt beside Clara, whispering something to calm her, but her eyes met mine, pleading. Elias, don't let him take me, she said, her voice breaking. But don't let him hurt her either. I was about to answer when a new voice broke through, sharp and commanding. Caleb Holt, you've gone far enough. It was Clara Thornton, the doctor, riding up with Reverend Jacob Lee and a handful of townsfolk. Harold Pike, the blacksmith, and others, all armed with rifles, shotguns, or whatever they could grab. They'd followed us from town, drawn by the commotion, and now they stood between us and Caleb's men. Thornton leveled her rifle at Caleb. You're threatening a child and a woman in front of half of Dustville, she said, her voice steady as steel. This town's done with your bullying. Let 'em go, or we'll make you. The crowd behind her grew, more townsfolk stepping forward, their faces set with resolve. I saw shopkeepers, farmers, even old Mrs. Calloway with a frying pan in hand. They weren't fighters, but they were fed up, and their numbers gave me hope. Caleb's confidence wavered, his eyes darting from Thornton to the growing crowd. You think you can scare me, Doc? He snarled, but his voice lacked its earlier bite. I seized the moment, stepping forward, my voice loud enough for everyone to hear. You're outnumbered, Holt. You want to start a war over this, you'll lose. Walk away, and we all go home peaceful. For a moment I thought he'd draw anyway. His hand hovered over his gun, his men shifting nervously. But the weight of the crowd, the rifles, the sheer public nature of it all held him back. This ain't over, he spat, mounting his horse. You'll see me again, Grant. He and his men rode off, kicking up dust, but I knew this was only a temporary victory. Caleb Holt was a snake, and snakes don't give up. They wait. I turned to Eliza and Clara, pulling them close. You okay? I asked, my voice hoarse. Clara nodded, her arms wrapped around my waist, while Eliza managed a shaky smile. Thank you, she whispered. I thought I was done for. I shook my head. Not while I'm breathing. But as we climbed back onto Dusty, the weight of what lay ahead pressed down on me. Caleb was gone for now, but he'd be back, and I had to be ready for Eliza, for Clara, for all of us. The ride toward my ranch felt like walking a tightrope over a canyon. Every rustle in the grass, every shadow in the distance set my nerves on edge. Eliza sat behind me on Dusty, her hands clutching my coat, while Clara nestled in front, her small body pressed against me. I could feel her trembling, though she tried to be brave. The prairie stretched out endless and empty, but I knew we weren't alone. Caleb Holt's threat echoed in my mind, a promise of violence waiting just out of sight. I gripped the reins tighter, wishing I had more than Doc Thornton's little Derringer, a pitiful two-shot pistol she'd slipped me before we left Dustville. It was better than nothing, but against Caleb and his men, it felt like a toy. We were halfway to the ranch, nearing Blackthorn Pass, a narrow trail flanked by rocky hills and thick scrub. I hated this stretch. Too many hiding spots, too few ways out. My gut told me trouble was coming, and when the first gunshot rang out, kicking up dirt inches from Dusty's hooves, it felt like the world stopped. "Get down!" I shouted, yanking the reins to steer us behind a boulder as more shots cracked through the air. Eliza stifled a scream, and Clara buried her face in my chest, whimpering. I shielded them with my body, my heart hammering so hard I thought it'd burst. From the hills above, Caleb's voice boomed, thick with triumph. "Thought you were clever back in town, didn't you, Grant? Out here there's no crowd to save you?" I peeked around the boulder, counting muzzle flashes. 4 men on the left ridge, 2 on the right. We were surrounded, pinned down with nowhere to run. The Derringer in my pocket felt useless against 6 armed men, but I clutched it anyway, my mind racing for a way out. "What do you want, Holt?" I called, trying to keep my voice steady. His laugh echoed, cold and cruel. "I want my property back. And I want you to pay for making me look like a fool. Hand over the girl, and maybe I let your kid live." Eliza grabbed my arm, her voice a desperate whisper. "Elias, give me to him. Don't let him hurt Clara." Her eyes were wide with fear, but there was a resolve there, a willingness to sacrifice herself. It broke my heart, but I shook my head. "Nobody's given anybody to anybody," I said firmly. "Clara, stay low. Don't move." Another volley of shots peppered the boulder, chips of rock flying. Clara sobbed quietly, and I felt like a failure, dragging my daughter into this nightmare. I thought of Sarah, how she'd trusted me to protect our girl, and now here we were, trapped like rats. I was about to call out again, hoping to stall, when I heard hoofbeats, fast, coming from the direction of Dustville. My heart leapt, but I didn't dare hope until I heard a familiar voice. "Caleb Holt, this is Judge Howard Vance. You're surrounded." I risked a look and saw a sight that nearly brought tears to my eyes. Judge Vance, riding tall on his black stallion, led a group of 9 townsfolk, Doc Thornton, Reverend Lee, Harold Pike, and others, all armed and ready. They'd followed us, sensing Caleb's plan, and now they spread out across the pass, their rifles glinting in the fading light. "You got no authority out here, Vance," Caleb shouted, but his voice cracked, betraying his nerves. "You're threatening innocent people in my jurisdiction," Vance shot back. "Your jurisdiction ends at town limits," Caleb countered, but the judge's voice was iron. "Not when I'm pursuing criminals who disturb the peace. Stand down, or we end this the hard way." The odds had shifted, 6 against 9, and Caleb's men looked uneasy, their guns lowering slightly. Then Eliza did something that stunned me. She stood up, stepping out from behind the boulder, fully exposed to Caleb's guns. "Eliza, get down!" I hissed, grabbing for her, but she shook me off, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "Caleb Holt, I got something to tell you about Jonas Wheeler that's going to change everything." My stomach dropped. What was she doing? She was going to get herself killed. Caleb's curiosity got the better of him. "What are you talking about, girl?" he demanded, his gun still raised, but his attention fixed on her. Eliza took a deep breath, her hands shaking, but her voice steady. "Jonas has been stealing from you for months. That $40 he said you paid for me? A lie. He's been skimming 20% off every horse deal you made, hiding it in a false bottom in his safe. I kept his books, Holt. I know where he keeps the money, close to $3,000 by now." The silence that followed was heavier than the rocks around us. Caleb's face twisted, his anger shifting from us to a new target. "You're saying Wheeler's been cheating me?" he growled. Eliza nodded, unflinching. Every sale, every deal. He doctored the ledgers to cover it. Check the safe in his office if you don't believe me. I saw the calculation in Caleb's eyes, the greed and rage warring within him. $3,000 was a fortune, enough to make a man like him forget his pride. Judge Vance seized the moment, his voice cutting through the tension. Holt, this don't change what you did here. Ambushing innocent people is a crime, and I'll see you hang for it. Caleb's men shifted, clearly spooked, but he raised a hand, his face a mask of cold resolve. Judge, this was a misunderstanding. I was just trying to recover what's mine, warning shots, that's all. It was a lie, and everyone knew it, but Caleb was looking for a way out, and I wasn't about to argue. So we're done here? I asked, standing slowly, keeping Clara behind me. Caleb's eyes flicked to Eliza, a flicker of his old hunger still there, but the promise of $3,000 was stronger. Girl, you testify about Wheeler's thievery, and we're square, he said. You help me get my money, I forget this whole mess. Eliza nodded quickly. I'll tell the judge everything. Caleb turned to his men, his voice sharp. Boys, we got a saloon keeper to deal with. They rode off toward Dustville, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. I pulled Eliza and Clara close, my legs weak with relief. That was reckless, I told Eliza, my voice shaking. But it worked. She gave a small, trembling smile. I had to do something. I couldn't let you and Clara die for me. Judge Vance approached, his face grim but relieved. Quick thinking, Miss Eliza, but Wheeler's going to want your head when he hears this. You're a witness now, and that makes you a target. Eliza straightened, her eyes fierce. He can't hurt me anymore. I ain't alone now. She looked at me and Clara, and for the first time, I saw hope in her eyes, real and unbroken. As we rode away from Blackthorn Pass, the tension drained from my body, leaving me hollow but alive. Eliza sat behind me, her hands steady now, while Clara chattered softly, already turning our brush with death into a grand adventure. The prairie stretched out before us, the stars beginning to peek through the twilight sky, and for the first time since stepping into the Red Coyote Saloon, I felt like we might actually make it home. But I knew the danger wasn't over. Eliza's words had shifted Caleb's wrath to Jonas Wheeler, but a man like Jonas wouldn't go down quietly, and I'd made myself a target by standing up to both of them. Still, as I looked at Clara's small form and felt Eliza's quiet strength, I knew I'd do it all again. The ride to my ranch was peaceful, the only sounds the creak of the saddle and the soft hum of the wind. Clara leaned against me, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, while Eliza stared ahead, lost in her thoughts. I wondered what she was feeling. Relief, fear, or something else entirely. Eliza, I said softly, you all right? She didn't answer right away, and when she did, her voice was barely a whisper. I don't know, Elias. I've been scared so long. I don't know what it feels like to be anything else. But thank you for everything. Her words hit me hard, and I swallowed the lump in my throat. You're safe now, I said, hoping I could keep that promise. My ranch came into view, a modest spread with a wooden house, a barn, and a white-painted fence I'd built with Sarah years ago. It wasn't much, just a few acres and a small herd, but it was home. It ain't fancy, I said, almost apologetically, as we dismounted. Eliza shook her head, her eyes bright with something like wonder. It's perfect, she whispered, and I could tell she meant it. Clara tugged at her hand, already warming to her. You're gonna like it here, Miss Eliza. We got chickens, and Papa makes the best cornbread. I smiled, my heart swelling at my daughter's innocence. For her, this was already a happy ending. Over the next few weeks, life settled into a new rhythm. Eliza stayed with us, sleeping in the spare room Sarah had once used for sewing. She threw herself into helping around the ranch, cooking, mending, even teaching Clara to read by the fire at night. Her hands, once trembling with fear, grew steady, and her smile came easier. I watched her bloom, like a flower finally given sunlight, and it eased the ache in my chest. But I didn't fool myself into thinking the storm had passed. Eliza's testimony against Jonas Wheeler was coming, and Dustville was buzzing with the fallout. Jonas was arrested the day after our escape, hauled in by Judge Vance after Eliza's ledgers proved he'd been skimming from Caleb and half a dozen other ranches. The Red Coyote Saloon shut down, its windows boarded up, a symbol of the town's rejection of Jonas's greed. Caleb surprisingly kept his word and left Eliza alone, his anger sated by recovering his money and seeing Jonas ruined. But I kept Doc Thornton's Derringer close, sleeping with it under my pillow, knowing men like Jonas had long memories and longer reaches. Eliza's testimony was a turning point. She stood in the Dustville courthouse, her voice clear and unwavering, detailing every transaction Jonas had fudged, every dollar he'd stolen. I sat in the back, Clara on my lap, watching her with a mix of pride and worry. She was no longer the terrified girl from the saloon. She was a force, reclaiming her life with every word. When Jonas was sentenced to 5 years for theft, the courtroom erupted in cheers, and Eliza turned to me, her eyes shining with tears of relief. "It's over," she mouthed, and I nodded, though I knew some wounds would take longer to heal. Living with Eliza changed the ranch in ways I hadn't expected. The house, once quiet and heavy with Sarah's absence, came alive again. Eliza's laughter mingled with Clara's as they baked bread or chased chickens, and I found myself smiling more than I had in years. She was good with Clara, patient and kind, teaching her letters and telling her stories of places she'd never seen. I caught myself watching her sometimes, the way her hair caught the sunlight, the way her hands moved with quiet confidence. I tried to push those thoughts away. Sarah's memory was still a sacred thing, but I couldn't deny the warmth growing in my chest. One evening, as we sat by the fire, Clara asleep in Eliza's lap, I found the courage to speak. "Eliza, you don't have to stay here out of obligation," I said, my voice rough. "You're free now. You could go anywhere." She looked at me, her eyes soft but certain. "Elias, this is the first place I felt safe since I was a child. You and Clara. You've given me a home. I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to." Her words hit me like a warm wave, and I realized I didn't want her to go. Not now, not ever. A year later, Reverend Lee married us in Dustville's little church, the pews packed with townsfolk who'd watched our story unfold. Doc Thornton was there, beaming like a proud mother, and Judge Vance clapped me on the back saying, "You did good, Grant. This town's better for it." Clara stood beside Eliza, holding her hand, her face glowing with joy. As we exchanged vows, I felt Sarah's presence, not as a shadow, but as a blessing, telling me it was okay to love again. Standing there, with Eliza's hand in mine and Clara's laughter ringing out, I realized something. Doing the right thing had cost me everything, my savings, my safety, my peace of mind. But it had given me something greater, a family, a purpose, a second chance at life. Dustville had changed that day on Main Street, not just for us, but for everyone who'd stood up to Caleb and Jonas. We'd shown that even in a hard world, kindness and courage could win. As we walked out of the church, the sun setting behind us, I looked at Eliza and Clara, my heart full. The prairie stretched out before us, vast and unforgiving, but it didn't scare me anymore. We'd faced the worst it could throw at us and come out stronger. Sometimes doing right means risking everything, but sometimes, if you're lucky, it gives you everything you never knew you needed.